Good afternoon, everyone. We would like to call this meeting of the Special Commission of State of Institute to order. My name is Evelyn Mateo, and I'm one of the commission's co-chair. My colleague Matt Mella is here as the commission's other co-chair. As usual, before we begin, we would like to let everyone know this commission meeting must follow the open meeting law. Any votes taken during the meeting will be done via call vote. We ask the commission members please mute themselves when they are not speaking and use the raise hand feature if they would like to speak. Before speaking, please state your name so everyone knows who is talking. For any questions posted from the audience and the question answer for this meeting, CEDAR will be reviewing the questions and holding them until the end of the meeting. We hope everyone has taken a moment to view the agenda. These are the items we will be discussing today. Thank you.
I'm sorry to interrupt, Evelyn.
Sorry,
Just wanted
Eva.
to let you know there's a couple of commission members that should be joining as attendees. They came in as participants. So I just wanted to let you know that.
I'm not sure if Matt, do I just continue? I'm
Yes,
sorry.
please. He hasn't joined.
Okay. Since our last meeting, we have had a new commission member appointed, Bill Hennon, who will serve as the representative of the Center of Independent Living. Bill would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. Thank you, Evelyn. I'm Bill Henning, Director of the Boston Center for Independent Living. I know a number of you we've crossed paths over the year. I've been engaged in disability advocacy for many years with a focus on some of the deinstitutionalization that's occurred in Massachusetts. So I'm pleased to be here. Thank you, Evelyn.
Thank you, Bill. We want to announce the departure of one of our commission members, Connor Snow, who has served as a representative of the Massachusetts State Archive on the Special Commission. Who will be leaving at the end of August. On behalf of the Special Commission, I would like to say that we have greatly appreciated working with O'Connor. Your insight and knowledge have been very valuable, and we want to wish you the best of luck in the future. Connor, will you like to say anything?
This is Connor Snow from the Massachusetts Archives. Thank you, Evelyn. And yeah, it's been a real pleasure working with everyone here at the Commission. The Commission's been doing great work. Also want to give a special thank you to everyone at CEDAR and for being a part of this. Without you guys, the resources of putting together all of this research and this commission has just been truly wonderful. And I'm really excited to see where this is going to go. And yeah, I wish you all the best of luck.
We would like to invite Emily from CEDAR to provide a high-level recap of our last meeting before vote to approve the minutes.
Thank you so much, Ellen. So in the last meeting, the Commission discussed a number of areas. There was a tool of commonly used terms and acronyms that was prepared by CEDAR that was presented to members, which will be updated as needed. The Commission members discussed a proposed timeline for the Commission's work. Commission members were reminded that they can expect a draft report from CEDAR in September. Commissioners agreed to add a meeting in October to give them enough time together to discuss each of the 3 areas of content, which are burials, records, and a memorial, before the end of the year. Commissioners discussed recent media about matters relevant to the Commission's work. Articles covered topics including the planning process for the Fernald grounds, a family member's efforts to get records about their family member who lived at Fernald, and an article about confidential police files that were stored unsecurely at Fernald. Each of the working groups also gave an update. The records group discussed a state bill that was proposed in the past that would give people access to public records from institutions. They talked about the idea of an amnesty program to allow people to return items previously stolen, sold, or purchased from institutions without facing charges. They also talked about information gathered from 36 other states on their record access rules. The burial work group talked about putting together a list of all known institutional cemeteries in the state and a gap analysis tool to review each institutional cemetery. We'll talk more about that tool in today's meeting. There was also discussion about the need to educate local towns and city officials about how to properly search for unmarked graves and handle it when there is a suspected unmarked grave in their town. In discussion, Commission members supported drafting guidance for these towns and cities. The work group on the framework for public recognition discussed what they learned about work in other memorial projects and planned to learn about the process used by the Willowbrook Memorial in New York. I'll turn it back to Evelyn.
So now we're gonna thank you. Thanks, Emily. Before we dive into the afternoon discussion, we have our vote 1 minute from the Commission's last meeting back in March. Draft copy of meetings and email members last week. Do members have any suggestion changes to the minutes? If not, we can proceed with the voting. As usual, contact the roll if everyone would please unmute. I will call out your names in alphabetical order. First, we have a motion to approve the minutes. Please remember to state your name. Thank you.
Andrew
we
Lemberow
have-
from the DPPC. I'll make a motion to approve the minutes from the last meeting.
This is Rania Kelly. I second it.
Thank you. I'll read read out members' names in alphabetical order from last name. Arena, Alice,
All right, Elise, go ahead. Do you approve? Yes. Okay, thank you.
Kate Benson,
Yes.
Sister Linda B. Bessam,
Yes, Sister Linda Bessam, I approve. Thank you.
Reggie Clark, Reggie Clark,
Yes.
and Fairchick,
I approve.
Alex Green. No, sorry, he's
Abstain because I wasn't there.
Bill Hannon,
Abstain, I wasn't on the commission at that point.
Kelly,
Yes.
Andrew,
Yes.
Mary Mahoney, Mary Mahoney, Lester Moore, Lester Moore, Brenda Rank,
Yes or no for approving minutes?
Moving minutes.
You approve them?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Connor Snow,
Yes.
and Matt Mallett. And myself, Evelyn Mateo, I approve. Did I miss anyone?
No, you're all set.
Thank you, everyone. The minutes are approved. As a reminder, copies of the approved minutes and all the materials from our commission meetings are available on the commission website. The next item on the agenda is the letter of inquiry regarding records and records access that were sent to the Governor Haley and Secretary Walsh in March. The special commission got a response on Monday, and it was included in the materials of this meeting. Is there anyone who did not receive the letter? We would now like to turn the discussion over to Commissioner Member Reggie Clark.
Hello?
Well,
Hey, Reggie. This is Jen Fugelstad. The slide is up for you.
Yeah, well, yesterday when you called, we talked about the letter yesterday. And you read the letter to me, telling me about the records and everything. Yesterday. We talked about a little bit about what we were going to talk about today during the meeting. Are you there, Jen?
I am. Reggie, would
Yes.
you like us to read out a summary of the letter?
Yes.
Okay, great.
Yes, please.
I think
I started.
I think that was
started.
Emily that was gonna read out the letter summary,
Okay.
Reggie. Perfect.
Okay.
Yeah. Yes, thank you. So the commission made 5 requests in their letter of inquiry, and I will go through each of the requests in a plain language summary of the response. So the first request was to look for any remaining records at the closed institutions. The response stated that the DMH and DDS, so the Department of Mental Health and the Department of Developmental Services, checked old state institutions that they used to run to find out if there were records left there. They found that records of people who lived at these locations were moved to other buildings at the Department of Mental Health and at DDS before the institutions closed and changed ownership. There are some places that were not safe to search. So at places like Medfield State Hospital, where only part of the buildings are closed, EOHHS, which is the Executive Offices of Health and Human Services, has been surveying the campuses. DMH's survey at Medfield State Hospital was limited because of safety worries with condemned buildings. They plan to work with other state agencies to see if they can safely get into those areas to search for records. There was also a request by the commission to address any record security issues identified. The Executive Offices of Health and Human Services checked closed DMH and DDS facilities, and they said they found no record security problems, except at the Fernald Developmental Center, which is a previous topic of discussion of this commission. They said that if any issues come up, DMH and DDS will handle them quickly following federal and state rules. The commission asked the agencies to develop an easy to follow process to make record requests. The Executive Office of Health and Human Services wants to help the commission and families of people who used to get services by making it easier to get their records, according to their letter. They said they're working on simple, clear ways to do this. The steps for former and current service recipients to ask for their records, or for a family or a state to ask for them, are on both the DMH and DDS websites on mass.gov, according to the letter. According to state law, family members can get medical records of DMH and DDS clients in certain situations. This includes when the family member is legally authorized to represent the person, like being a custodial parent, court-approved guardian, or a personal representative of the deceased person's estate. Records can also be given if a court orders it, if the client agrees, or if the commissioner decides it's best for the person. The fourth request of the commission was to create a clear process for how all confidential records were to be stored and when these records are allowed to be destroyed. The letter stated that DMH and DDS have specific rules and procedures for handling client and patient records. Both DMH's privacy handbook and DDS's privacy handbook outline rules for how to handle, store, and keep confidential records. The handbooks are stated to follow state and federal laws requiring staff to protect the confidentiality of protected health information, or PHI, that the agencies create or keep. The policies require taking reasonable steps to prevent accidental sharing and to keep protected health information in secure places like locked offices or filing cabinets. DDS and DMH stated that they follow the Massachusetts statewide records retention schedule for deciding how long to keep records and how to dispose of them. A copy of the schedule can be found on the Secretary of the Commonwealth's website. The law that governs how long medical records must be kept requires a 20-year retention period. Medical records can't be destroyed or moved to the state archives unless the Records Conservation Board, which is overseen by the Secretary of the Commonwealth, gives permission. The letter states a tracking system is used to monitor when records are moved, who takes them, and where they are kept. The final request of the commission in this letter was to provide a list of records that may be stored at facilities or government offices still in operation. The letter states that both DMH and DDS maintain detailed lists of records and have access to records still in their possession, including those stored in the state archives. And that concludes the summary of the letter.
Thank you. We would like to open up a discussion about the EOHHS response to the letter of the inquiry. Since the last meeting of the commission was one news articles have been published that we want everyone to know about. The article is from Warburn and that report ongoing vandalism of the Fernald property and the discovery of the Nazi skinhead graffiti. We want to share the article with the commission and see what people thought. Are there any things that commission want to discuss about this article? Matt has his hand up. Alex.
Hi, this is Alex Green. I'll go first, I guess, on both of these items. Obviously, the skinhead graffiti is very disturbing at the Fernald School, and I was struck that the city of Waltham's response, the police response, said that this did not use the word hate crime for this. They refused to call it hate, and that they're proud of having arrested 50 people when there's been documented thousands and thousands of break-ins there. So it's sort of, and I guess that goes to maybe the way that things are framed and written. I'm disappointed in the letter that we've received from the secretary because I think it's talking around things, and I think we need to get specific about things, which is the whole reason that this commission exists. But some things that just stand out to me where there are examples of where we could get more specific. The letter sounds like it's just the Fernald, but as we've said repeatedly, and I do want to be clear also that these things are often said repeatedly and have been brought forward repeatedly. Many of those records that were left at the Fernald were in boxes labeled from other state institutions. So to say that there were none found at other institutions doesn't really vibe right, because in actuality, those other institutions' documents were then sent to Fernald and left open to the public. And that's where we need an inventory and an accounting that gets specific about what this is. If a tracking system is used, I would love to know. At our very first meeting last year, our DMH representative to the board, who is the head of inpatient facilities, said openly in the meeting that tons of documents were left in buildings that were no longer being used by DMH, and the staff regularly talked about how they did not know what they were supposed to do with them and how to handle them. So if things are tracked, I would like to know what has changed between last May's meeting and now, specifically that tracks where those documents were, and where they've gone to, because if that tracking system is in place according to the letter, then we should know that. If we don't know that, rife through this letter and in general, that are born out of being unspecific. And what it all led me to believe is, if they're really on a 20-year retention schedule and taking these things to the Records Commission, the Oversight Board, I would love to see that stopped for some time until we have a handle on what is going on. Like no request should be granted from DMH or DDS to destroy records right now until we know what those records are, because I feel like this is not taking this seriously. That will come up later with another matter that's in front of us, but I'm at a low ebb on this one. So sorry to talk for so long, but I found this an incredibly whitewashed take on this relative to the severity of the issue. And I'll remind my colleagues on the commission that this is being investigated by the Civil Rights Division of the Federal Office of Health and Human Services. This is a very serious matter. And I did not think that this letter should have taken 90 days or 60 days or whatever to produce, given how little it told me.
Victor?
Yes, thank you. I just want to make sure that nobody else has their hand raised first because they wanted to respond to the letter of inquiry from the secretary. So I don't want to use anybody else's speaking opportunity for that. Is there anybody else's hand up?
No.
Okay, thank you. Okay. This just kind of dovetails a little bit on this topic, but I'm not going to comment on this topic directly. But as we know, this subject came to light from people on campus who went on campus and took pictures of the documents. And I just wanted to bring to light that, Fernald, as we know, is a closed facility that is under the auspices now of the city of Waltham. But with DDS still having 23 area offices, 4 regions, and 2 operating facilities, and Hogan and Danvers, in Rentham Developmental Center. We would just want to bring to light that, if anybody goes on these campuses or these offices to take pictures or anything like that, particularly, those that are active, meaning that, individuals living there and people working there, that is trespassing. DDS has an obligation to protect the individuals and staff who work there. So, we ask that if anybody receives anything where it's clear that they had trespassed onto particularly an active facility or office, that you can just let me know. I would be highly appreciative, because if there's videos or pictures being circulated from an active facility, that means that, we had individuals close by, and we need to make sure that our individuals are protected. So, we ask that people do that. Like anybody else who trespasses onto our properties operated by DDS, health and safety of our individuals and staff are foremost, and we would have to take necessary action, including up to and including notifying the local authorities. So, that's just not directed towards a letter of inquiry, but it kind of like presents an opportunity just to make sure that it's there. And I just wanted to be able to share this, and be happy to discuss this offline with folks, just in the interest of time. And that's all I have to say on this. Thanks again for the opportunity.
Hello, this is Reggie calling. I agree everything what Alex Green has said.
The next item on the agenda is a report
Oh,
from
sorry to interrupt. Evelyn,
Oh,
this is Jennifer
okay.
again. Jay has his hand up.
Good afternoon. I just want to acknowledge the comments that were made and say I agree. I'm Jay Tallman. I'm from the Department of Mental Health. I have been participating in the larger meetings that the commission has, and I just want to say we can always do things better in terms of records. It is a little troubling to hear, Alex, the example that you gave in terms of redaction and people not understanding what they're receiving and why they're receiving it in the format that they're getting. So that is definitely something we could definitely do better on. And I mean, this is a process where we welcome input and feedback. Hopefully what comes out of this is recommendations. I think that's part of what this group is charged with. As agencies, we would welcome input on how we could do things better or more efficiently. And then in terms of just records, I will say for the Department of Mental Health, most of the facilities that have closed, most of the buildings have been demolished except at Medfield. As Emily mentioned, as she described the letter from the secretary, that is one area where we cannot say for certain, because we were unable to, when we surveyed buildings, safely get into those buildings. But for the most part, former Department of Mental Health operated facilities, those buildings that have closed have been demolished. And that's why we know. We also, we have surveyed on many different times buildings when they were there to try to get at that. And yes, we do know where our records are. And I think to speak to why, I mean, we're an agency of 4,000 employees. There's a lot of confusion out there about different things. It's not an excuse. It's not to make, but in terms of communication, sometimes, we don't all know. As the policy director of the Department of Mental Health, I can assure you, I don't know everything about the department. I'm learning every day, even on these issues. I'm learning from this group, and I'm learning from folks in the department, finding the right people who have the institutional knowledge and who have the experience. And that's what I hope, as someone who can help, as a liaison to this commission, we can help identify who those people are and where we can access and find information. So I think we can always do a better job. I'm not saying that everything we do at the department is 100% perfect, but we do try, and we're here to collaborate and work with the commission.
Bill Hennon.
Sure, thank you. This is my first meeting, so I'm a bit new to the issue, though I have read the many news accounts on the records at Fernald. Jay said something that kind of answered the point I was going to raise, but it's still out there kind of to me. Alex raised some very serious concerns still being outstanding, and was just wondering if this body might take further steps if there was not full satisfaction with the letter that Secretary Walsh took, because it sounds like there are issues still out there. Maybe, Jay suggested the commission could make recommendations. I just wondered if there was any plan to further pursue the matter, because there's been some concern with the response letter. I have not seen the original letter sent to Secretary Walsh. That would be helpful too, so I could understand things better. Thank you.
Emily.
Thank you, Bill. We'll certainly make sure you get that letter. The letter had two areas that I think I want to make sure the commission recognizes as an opportunity to consider. One, the agencies did offer to work with the commission to improve transparency and in other areas. So I think the commissioners could consider where they would like to work with the agencies and in what manner. Secondly, if there is not full satisfaction with the response, the work of the commission, I think, has the opportunity to try to verify or validate that the responses that you received are accurate and complete. So you can also identify areas of further work, this with or without CEDAR's support, where you would like to do some fair validation work to gather your own facts. So just put those two areas out there for consideration for commissioners.
Alex?
To that end, what if we were to have the work groups before the next meeting consider each their own responses to how they'd like to move forward with this and put something forward to the chairs for consideration as a unified kind of way to respond to this at the next meeting, so we could put something forward that's clear and organized. The work doesn't just fall to the chairs, it falls into the specialization of each work group. Could identify each area, get it to something really, really short and clear, and then consider that for a vote, either for a letter or for future action for the next meeting. With that, does that sound reasonable to folks? I could put that forward as a motion. We could just agree to do it. I don't know.
I agree, Alex.
This is Mary Mahan McCauley from MOD. And can everyone hear me okay? I'm joining via phone today.
Yes.
Okay, great. I just want to make a couple of comments going back a little bit. I agree that it's extremely disturbing that skinheads marking up the buildings. It's that piece. I don't know what else to say about that, but it's in secondly of it's an interesting response as far as the letter, and I would agree that some of what's in the letter is kind of the rules at hand, the way things should go, the way things should be, and I think what we've seen and what's been shown and uncovered, and it's part of why this commission exists and has had the commission exist, is that things aren't always done like they should be, right? I've worked for the state for 35 years, and for the most part, I'm always gonna, kind of support a lot of my colleagues through the years who've been great employees. But that doesn't mean that everything that the Commonwealth has condoned or done has always been good. We know clearly that there's been many, many problems, and in these institutions there was illegal activity and just very unfair treatment, and it goes on. And we're trying to uncover that in a way, as we've discussed, to uncover, to disclose it, to identify the things that were done that shouldn't have been done, to give to give pride and recognition to the individuals that weren't completely respected as humans in many ways. And getting back to the letter, as far as what we're discussing, the transparency is, I agree that the letter is, there's a lot of generalizations and how things should be, but I like the idea of bringing back the letter to the subcommittees and maybe taking particular sections and saying, yes, this may be the rule and how it should go, but we've seen from this or that action that that's not always happening, or we want to help and we want to make changes, right? And so if we can go back with suggestions, ideas, recommendations, and within that, there's also questions on different sections of the letter that we're questioning. So, that's how I'd want to proceed. Does that make sense?
Yes. Does anyone have their hand raised? Alex.
Sorry, Evelyn. This will be the last time I talk on this.
Okay.
Why don't we leave it at this then? I will make a motion that we take the letter into the subcommittees for consideration and recommendations for next steps to the chairs before the next meeting.
I'd second the motion. This is Mary.
We're gonna continue. The
Um,
next,
I'm sorry to interrupt. Would we do a vote at this point? I'm just looking at the notes for capturing. Is this something that we should be voting on?
I believe so with the motion on the floor.
Okay. Evelyn, do you want to do the roll call again?
yes, I can. Sorry. Yep. Elise, Elise,
Hi, no questions. Sorry about that.
Kate Benson,
Yes.
Sister Linda,
Yes, I agree. Very good suggestion.
Reggie,
Yes.
Ann, Alex,
Yes.
Bill,
Yes.
Rena,
Yes.
Andrew,
Present.
Mary,
Yes.
Vesper, Brenda,
You guys vote yes? Okay. Okay, thank you.
Connor,
Yes.
Matt, um, and myself, yes. Is there another?
Evelyn, I think everybody agreed.
Okay.
4 yeses and 1 person absent.
So we're gonna move on. The next item on the agenda is a report from the work groups. We have 3 work groups, one on records and records request process, one on burials and burials location, and one on focused on framework for remembrance. The groups need additional members. Please consider joining a work group. If you would like to participate in any of the work groups, please email Cedars support email address. And Cedars team will share the dates and the next scheduled work groups meetings. And we would now like to invite each work group to share reports on their work they have done so far. Alex?
Hey, folks, reporting out from the Records and Records Access Committee, and I'll just echo what Evelyn's saying. We desperately need folks in the work groups, especially these coming months. We're going to get near a report. We're going to really have to drill into it. We're going to want to be offering suggestions. Obviously, these meetings are large and we have a lot to get through. So if you can join in on those subcommittee meetings, you don't have to join them all, but joining one subcommittee and being there is an awesome thing and super helpful. In the Records Committee, we met recently. Handful of things we're going through right now. Just an update on legislative activity. There's a bill in the Senate and in the House that will open records up after 75 years at the Massachusetts Archives. It was originally put forward by the Secretary of the Commonwealth, which oversees the archives, so it is supported by them to bring us in line with other states because we lock off records in an unusual way in this state right now. The legislative session, formal session, ends at the end of the month. Bills technically have to pass by then, though they can pass in what's called the informal session before the end of the year, as long as nobody objects. It's a little tricky. The bill has gotten farther than it ever has before. It seems to have a lot of supporters now that folks know what it does, but that's no guarantee. And so we will continue to watch and see. I think always anyone in the state would be foolish to say that they are certain a bill is going to pass. It's more likely that it may not pass, just because very few bills pass in any year. But we are watching and hopeful that it might move its way through. You've heard a little about records requests from family members to the state. Some of those are going through on the DDS side. DDS is providing records and outreach. I know of a handful of folks so far who've gotten records. And as you heard me describe, I think it's a somewhat uneven process, but we are at least talking that through with DDS and I think trying to work on it in good faith. A couple other things, and then I will absolutely take some questions and comments. Foxborough State Hospital, Cedar and the Records Committee are working with DMH to explore the possibility of actually recreating one of the lists of people buried at Foxborough's State Hospital cemetery. There's not a list anymore, but it's possible to recreate one. So they're discussing ways to retrieve that information, and if records can kind of tell us, then to disclose the names of those people, which would be a really, really nice thing. So early in that, hard to know, but going through those steps, which is nice. The letter of inquiry, as we know, we kind of discussed what next steps on that will be. So happy to take any questions. I see Sister Linda's hand.
Yes, I was wondering what is the bill number for that legislation? I always look things up afterwards, and I know the bill number is very helpful.
Sure. It's a terrific question. Let me make sure that I actually give you the right number. So hang on one second. In the House, the bill is H3033. And in the Senate, the bill is S1965. I will say that when you read the House version, it was revised recently by the committee. And they know that revision is not where it needs to end up being. So you will see some difference between the Senate version, which is just one line. That's the original version of the bill. And that's kind of what a lot of the supporters and folks have been after. The House version, they tried something, but I think there was some misunderstanding. So they're just working through the language on it, try to move it back toward what it was before.
Okay, thank you.
Of course.
Thank you.
If there are no other questions, I will kick it back to the chair. Back to you, Evelyn.
Hey, could you please give an update on the burials and burials location work group?
Absolutely. This is Kate Benson. The Burials and Burial Locations Group also met recently. We've compiled a list of as many known burial locations as we can find. 26 cemeteries in all have been identified across the state. Some of those cemeteries are on the grounds of former institutions, but some burials took place in the city or town cemeteries in plots that were purchased by the state. Currently, the status of each cemetery needs to be evaluated. There's a wide variation in relation to the care and maintenance of these cemeteries, and also a wide variation regarding whether or not the graves are marked. And several cemeteries and/or institutions are rumored to have unmarked graves on the grounds. We've, as a group, have requested assistance from the Mass State Archaeologist's Office to collect guidance on what steps to take if a possible unmarked grave is suspected at any of the sites of former institutions. Jen, is there a next slide?
Yeah, there's a couple more.
I was gonna say, I was like, I think I have way more to say. In the last meeting, we shared that we created a gap analysis in order to evaluate the status of the cemeteries. And some of the things that the gap analysis will evaluate in each cemetery is the condition of the cemetery. Is there signage that tells you a cemetery is even there, and what cemetery it is? Is there evidence of ongoing maintenance, like mowing, weed whacking, plantings, maintenance of stones? Is there any kind of security, whether it be a gate or security patrols? Is there evidence of trash being left behind, vandalism being committed? We're also evaluating the burial locations. Are there grave markers, and what do those grave markers look like? Is there a memorial? Some of the cemeteries have a main stone with the list of everyone's names on them, or some other type of memorial. And is there a possibility of unmarked graves in that cemetery? And also the records. Are records available that contain the necessary information, the person's name, what section of the cemetery they're in, what their plot number is? Is there a way to locate who's buried where? As an example, we chose the Northampton State Hospital Cemetery. This is what a gap analysis could look like for Northampton. The burial ground was used from 1858 to 1921, and records mention it as the Hospital Cemetery or Hillside Cemetery. It is an inactive cemetery. It's currently managed by Smith Vocational Agricultural School. The land is owned by the city of Northampton under permanent agricultural use restriction. DMH staff research in 1997 found 181 confirmed burials using hospital records and city registers, and another 413 burials were unclear, but possibly on the hospital grounds. After 1921, some patients who weren't claimed by family were sent to medical schools under state laws. The hospital closed in 1993, and the cemetery area called Cemetery Hill is now used by Smith Vocational for farming instruction. And it's protected for agricultural use and has no grave markers. The exact location and number of burials are unknown. So Northampton obviously is kind of the worst case scenario example, but this is what a gap analysis could look like once it's completed for each cemetery. So some of the things that we would like all members of the commission to consider when it comes to the burials piece is how does the commission want to complete the gap analysis for each cemetery? We have some options for how that can get finished. How does the commission want to explore the likelihood and possible locations of unmarked graves? There are some current questions about how that's to be approached because there have been some other individuals who have approached possible unmarked graves and cemetery locations. And of course, just open discussion. So the first question, how we want to complete the gap analysis. Does anyone want to weigh in on that? It's kind of a big question. I don't know if anyone has thoughts. This might be something people want to spend more time thinking about before jumping on the bandwagon on this one. Alex?
Yes, to your point, yes, more time. Time to think.
Yeah, this is a really big question, and it's one that just the action alone of considering this gap analysis is going to take some time.
What do you recommend on that? Do you recommend kind of taking that up in the subcommittee? Because that's a lot. So I feel like it deserves its own maybe.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I think this is also another good place to encourage other commissioners to join the committees. This is going to be a lot of legwork. So having more members on the burial committee would be wonderful to be able to open these discussions up to how we want to handle this activity. So I'll just put that plug out there again. And the second question also may take some further thought of how we want to approach the likelihood and possible locations of unmarked graves. Alex has found in his research that there are outliers in a number of the cemeteries. I know that for us in Belchertown, we are unsure whether or not our fence line is correct. So there's a possibility that we may have some unmarked and unconsidered individuals. There are also some quote unquote lost cemeteries for us to consider. So that's a pretty big category as well. Does anyone have any general questions? Thoughts?
Yes, hi Kate, this is Mary Mahima.
Hi Mary.
How are you? I actually have a question about, in some ways, both of them, but the first one, as far as the gap analysis, I'm wondering if it's that you want some assistance in what factors or variables to list as far as the gaps, if it's going to be more things than what you talked about earlier in cemeteries, like as far as doing the gap analysis, or is it that you're looking for how to complete this body of work, which is quite immense, because I think it was 26 cemeteries altogether that we know of, or is it kind of both of those?
So Jen has already assembled the gap analysis itself. So we have a template to work from. I think it's how we're going to approach the body of work in general, as you said, because it's a lot of cemeteries. Some of the cemeteries are exceptionally large. We think about Tewksbury with 8,500 people, and we're not even, there's also the matter of which of those were almshouse burials, which were state hospital burials. We also have some cemeteries that are now serving a dual purpose between previous DMH burials and then they shifted to DOC burials. So I think how we're going to complete this gap analysis is what we're approaching now, is what this could look like, how we get it done.
Yes, that is going to take some thought and many instruments, maybe.
Yes, definitely. Bill, I saw your hand up, but Emily, do you want to jump in first?
Thank you, Kate. I just wanted to clarify what Cedar has done to date. So we've taken what's available in kind of paper documents and online documents and other things and tried to populate this gap analysis or fill it in as best we can. But there is another set of work to confirm that information and probably some field-based work. So it could be that the commission considers, requesting a budget and a set of recommendations about what to do next and requests additional assistance. Filling in the gap analysis is beyond the financial resources that the commission has allocated to it for this particular period and the timeline. So I just wanted to let you know, it's not that the gap analysis is blank, but it has more work needed, and that's kind of where we're sitting with its current state, in case that's helpful for commissioners to understand.
Yes.
Yeah, Mary asked a question I had, and when she was talking, and Kate, and now especially Emily on the resources, answered a further question I had. There aren't the full needed resources, because as Kate presented it, it looks super intense. with work still ahead, but all important. Thank you.
Absolutely. Are there any other questions regarding the burials piece? Andrew?
Yes, thank you, Andrew Leverell, DPPC. So I guess to circle back to Emily's point, so would that be something that we'd want to maybe consider for our final report for the year, is an assessment of basically what we'll need for resources moving forward? And yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Okay. If there are no other questions about the burials piece, I will turn it back over to Evelyn.
Thank you, everyone. Reggie, could you give an update of the framework for Remembrance Work Group, please?
I would agree with Alex, everything Alex said and everything. And we just need to come together and figure out, who's doing what to make sure that people ask for something, you're entitled to get it. Instead of digging ourselves in a hole that we can't get out of.
Reggie, I will always agree with your agreement with me because it feels good. It's nice to hear your voice. We need what do we need? We need an update from you on the framework for Remembrance Committee, the Willowbrook thing, which I missed.
Okay.
To have missed. Do you have an update on what your work group's been up to?
Willowbrook. Me and Jen and some of us talked about that. They talked about the museum they had there in Willowbrook, which is in New York, and everything. Jan?
Sure, I can provide the commission some details. This is Jen Fugelstad from Cedar. The presentation that Reggie referenced was done by the steering committee of the Willowbrook Mile. That was back in June. We did record the presentation, so if members would like to see that, I believe I sent it out. So we spoke, we listened for about an hour about how the Willowbrook Mile was created, and some of the takeaways that we learned at that meeting was, first off, the Willowbrook Mile is dedicated to only one institution, which is the Willowbrook State School on Staten Island in New York. We also learned that the Willowbrook Mile took several years to complete. It included gathering input from stakeholders, securing support from their legislature, which included funding, as well as securing property. The Willowbrook Steering Committee also had to do some fundraising. So they have a ongoing fundraising project to continue to enhance the memorial. They also had to develop a design for the memorial that had multiple components, including a walking trail, a museum, a number of memorial plaques along the way, and they're continuing to enhance their memorial by making it accessible for people who are visually impaired as well. So I was wondering if there was anyone who attended the presentation or watched the recording that wanted to share your thoughts.
I will, Jen. Hi, this is Kate Benson. I really appreciated the presentation about the Willowbrook Mile because I think it gives us some great ideas of where to start here in Massachusetts, especially when I think it was Diane, right? Jen was her name. When Diane discussed how they got legislators involved. They were able to fundraise. They did get state money. And I think those are places that we've had trouble starting at here in Massachusetts. And I think after hearing how Diane approached it, she had some really great ideas that I think we can employ here. We have a lot of state legislative folks who are now really very aware of what we're doing. They're very aware of disability history. It's a recent thing, but I think we've got a lot of attention and a lot of heat right now that we can capitalize on. And I think projects like the Willowbrook Mile are things that we can kind of interpret into the institutions that we had here in Massachusetts. It's close to some of what we're doing in Belchertown, which was really cool to hear, because we're going to have interpretive trails and a museum and things like that. So that was reaffirming that others have been able to do it. So I really appreciated and enjoyed that presentation.
Any other feedback or issues, points that folks would like to raise? Well, what I will let folks know is we are setting up a time to talk with the people who created the California Memorial Project, which has been going on for the past 20 years in the state of California. And their framework for remembrance really covers their whole state and includes all the institutions and hospitals for people with disabilities in that state. So we're setting up time to talk with them to learn more about how they took a statewide approach to their framework for remembrance.
Thank you, everyone. Next, we would like to ask Cedar to lead a discussion regarding the history of institution in Massachusetts and the related scope of work for the commission.
Thanks, Evelyn. This is Jennifer from Cedar. I'm going to spend a few minutes talking about the history of institutions in Massachusetts, because we're hoping to establish kind of the scope in which we're going to focus our research. So I wanted to take just a few minutes of your time to talk through the history. Next slide, please. I also wanted to mention before we get started, there are some words used in this presentation that are offensive. These are words that were used over time in the history that were used to label people. And we're using those to show the full history of the institutions in the state. So I wanted to just give that word of warning. Next slide. In order to talk about the history of institutions in Massachusetts, we have to start by talking about how Massachusetts took care of their poor. Poor people were typically people who could not take care of themselves and support themselves financially. Often that would be somebody who was elderly, or somebody who has a physical disability, somebody who may have been blind or deaf, as well as people who have intellectual or developmental disabilities or mental illness. In the colonial times, when Massachusetts was still a colony, you could get, and you couldn't take care of yourself, the community around you would come together to help. You could stay with your neighbor, or people may come to your home and give you assistance, and it could be long-term or short-term. But by the 1700s, the care of the poor became known as what we call custodial care, meaning that the towns would pay families to look after the poor people in their town. And towns also started building what they call almshouses, sometimes referred to as poorhouses. And that's where people could live and receive help, but you had to be a resident of the town. We move forward in Massachusetts history, and we see that institutionalization became kind of a formal structure. It was really the institutionalization of the poor. So in the 1850s, there were a lot of immigrants coming to the US, and the almshouses they couldn't help everyone who was sick or poor. So the state government built almshouses in Bridgewater, Munson, and Tewksbury because more and more people needed help. When people went to an almshouse, they may have been sorted into groups like sick or drunk or insane or healthy or disabled. And some people stayed in the almshouse for the rest of their lives. At an almshouse, you were expected to learn skills like weaving and farming and woodworking, and that you had to help pay for your food and your care. And at that same time, many people who lived there also had a mental illness or a disability. There were not separate places for people to go to. But almshouses did start to create separate spaces within the almshouse for people who they called insane, to keep them apart from others. And over time, people with disabilities became a very large part of the almshouse population. And when they got too crowded, people with disabilities were sent to the prisons. And the prisons were overcrowded, and life there was very hard for the children and adults who were sick and elderly or disabled. Next slide, please. So in the mid 1800s, people like Dorothea Dix led movements to improve the conditions for the mentally ill and disabled. What she saw were people warehoused in almshouses and prisons, and that led to the creation of state asylums to care for those with a mental illness. And the first asylum was opened in Worcester. The state also wanted to make some changes for the poor children who lived in the state. A state primary school, reform schools, and training schools were created to help poor children become educated and learn skills that would help them become what they say were productive members of society and lift them out of poverty. Children who committed minor crimes like skipping school or being disobedient could be sent to a training school or a reform school. Sometimes it was the court, or it was their family or local officials who decided where a child should go. But the goal was that this was short term. Once a child learned the skills for a job and how to stay out of trouble, they would return home or live with a local family. And also at the same time, the US was going into an industrial revolution. So factories needed workers, and schools started offering kind of this vocational education to prepare children for jobs. But one of the challenges the schools faced were children that had disabilities. These children often struggled to find and keep jobs or live independently. And the schools were saying that these children took up space and other kids needed to enter the school. So the schools started to create some separate housing on their campuses for children with disabilities. With that happening, the state wanted to improve education for children with disabilities, and they formed some commissions that eventually led to the creation of specialized institutions like the Perkins School for the Blind and the Fernald School. Next slide, please. So in the late 1800s, early 1900s, we saw a lot of institutions being built in Massachusetts, about 15, depending on how you count. Institutions for the insane and the feeble-minded were built across the state. IQ tests also became more widely used, though, it's not the same way that we would use an IQ test now, especially how it was administered or interpreted. And these tests often determine where individuals would be placed. Sometimes the state used IQ tests to decide if someone should be committed to an institution. Also, at the same time, eugenics was becoming more popular, and eugenics promoted the idea that healthy or quote unquote superior people should reproduce, while those who were considered inferior, like those with disabilities or people who didn't fit societal norms, should not. So the eugenicists believed that society would benefit by removing people they considered unfit through segregation and social exclusion. Next slide, please. And then finally, defective delinquents. In the early 1900s, the state conducted a study on what they saw was a rise of crime and the presence of individuals labeled mentally ill or mentally deficient. That's the language of the time. They also included epileptics or quote unquote degenerates. And as a result, they created a new category called defective delinquents. And these were individuals considered mentally deficient criminals. And the legislature authorized the segregation of these individuals by establishing departments of defective delinquents. And this allowed for their permanent removal from society and placement into custodial care for the rest of their lives. And superintendents of prisons, asylums for the insane, and schools for the feeble-minded had the authority to actually transfer people to the Department of Defective Delinquents if they thought that that person was not suitable for their institution. Next slide. So on this slide is the listing of the formal specialized Massachusetts state institutions. So we have our DMH facilities, Boston State, Danvers State, Foxborough State, Gardner, Grafton, Medfield, Met State, Northampton, Taunton, Westboro, and Worcester. A lot of facilities there. And then we have the DDS facilities, Belchertown, Devon, Fernald, Glavin, Hogan, Munson, Templeton, and Rentham. Next slide. So basically, kind of the summary is people with mental illnesses and developmental disabilities were included in different parts of institutional settings in Massachusetts over time. And separate institutions for people with these conditions were created starting around late 1800s, early 1900s. So, for example, institutions that served many people with mental illness and developmental disabilities before separate institutions were created included the Almshouse, primary, reform, and training schools, as well as the defective delinquent class. I know we're very close on time here. What we wanted to do is have a discussion about what should be included in the work of the Special Commission. So I want to open it up to anybody who had thoughts or comments.
Hi, this is Kate. I know we talked about this in our smaller group the other day, and Alex had to hop off, so he asked me to be his voice. Oh no, Alex is still there. Never mind. But I'm still going to talk for him because I can. I know we talked briefly about the primary reform and training school piece, and how we can kind of bring those under our umbrella or not. We talked a little bit. And this is for everyone else on the commission. We talked a bit about how broad our scope already is. You saw the list of all of those institutions. It's pretty lengthy, but there is really heavy evidence that people with disabilities were housed first in those reform and training schools and the primary schools like Munson. And then a lot of times those individuals with disabilities and with mental illness were passed back and forth. So it's a really tough question to ask of how wide do we open our arms and how broad do we go? But because we did have a question about some of those lost cemeteries, some of those lost cemeteries are on grounds of reform schools that then became asylums that then later became something else. We've had a lot of institutions that have changed hands and changed names and purposes. So I think it's really important to think about how we include some of those institutions in our work, especially, after Jen's summary of looking at how those institutions all worked together, came together, served a lot of the same people over time. So I guess it's just a question of how big of a bite can we take?
Thanks, Kate. Bill?
I don't know if the commission has the ability to dig deeply on all of them, but I found the history extraordinarily useful. And I'll speak as somebody who's older than most of you on this panel. And I can remember as a kid growing up near Worcester, going by the old Worcester State Hospital, or we used to drive down Route 9 to go to a Red Sox game or something like that. And you'd look off to the left going down Route 9 and see the reform school, as it was told to me, in Westboro, and you'd anywhere in the state. And even just hearing that starts to bring back a memory and a mystery. And there's a whole generation of people like me who went by those and never really understood, because it was the classic, put them away in these frightening looking places. Your parents would say, if you're not good, you could go there, or something like that, and at minimum, I found that just that little presentation at the end on the list of them and what they were and how it all ties into segregating and punishing people for no good reason as extraordinarily critical background. That's in a memory for a whole set of people my age who don't even know what disability rights is, I imagine.
Andrew?
Yes, hi, Andrew Leverell, and I know we're up against time, and I'm sure this is sort of an idea that the working group already had, but I mean, I'm guessing maybe the best way to focus it would be to start, with the primary history, sort of the most recent facilities, because obviously that's the most targeted to our work, and then sort of work our way backwards from there. This is obviously going to be a multi-year effort, and start with sort of where the focus is, and let's see how far along we get and how much we get for resources, and then maybe we can work backwards.
Thank you. Linda?
Yes, I'm part of another group that's looking into like reparations, and what you just put forth for us, it almost seems there needs to be some form of reparations for as people said, people were segregated and really treated in a very subhuman way, and basically their rights were violated. That's how it's coming across. So it's a question that I raise. Looking at the current situation now, where those institutions are, what is the question of reparations? Is that something that is needed? And I don't know what form that would take, but it just raises to mind. Definitely, I think there has to be some public apology saying, this is what happened. Truly disrespectful to the innate human dignity of all, and what does it mean to move forward from this? And even with these current places, like what is going on there now? So like it just raises those questions for me. That's all I'm saying. Yeah.
Thank you, Linda. Alex?
I have to jump in a second, but I just, first of all, again, thank you. I know we said this the other day, but I'll say it to high heaven. This sort of stuff is so overwhelmingly large.
It
and
is.
put together in such a clear and powerful and compelling way is really, really, really important to see. I just wanted to, Sister Linda, when you just said what you were saying, I just wanted to let you know and affirm that when we were writing the legislation and the coalition of folks was pushing this through, what you just said was the type of stuff that was discussed around the component on memorialization and remembrance and where do we go in the future.
Yeah.
And it was said at the time, and especially Senator Barrett, who was kind of pushing this a lot through, said he wanted us to think expansively and radically and widely and in a forward-thinking way about what it means to not do these things at their worst, again, to people. What does it mean to go forward as a society? So what you're saying, the way you said it, it just resonates a lot with me. And I would really encourage you to join in on the memorialization work group that Reggie's been doing a lot with and some of the other folks, and really put these ideas forward because I think they get to the heart and soul of a lot of what motivated a lot of us to get involved in this in the first place.
Well, I thank you for that invitation, and I will do that, and I do it because I'm part of this other group that's looking just for the city of Boston that issued a public apology for its role in the transatlantic slave trade. Let me tell you, and that public apology was incredible. And it might be a model of how we need to proceed. So there's conversations going on right now. Right now, there's conversations going on this whole theme of reparations that are just one of the most powerful, very powerful. So I can imagine if you do the same, on this issue of it has ramifications. So all right, I will do that.
Excellent, right on. And you have a good starting place. The 1990s, the residents of the Fernald School, who it was revealed, and Rentham, I believe, who had been tested with radioactive material, they were promised an apology they never got. And I just spoke maybe a month ago with one of the last surviving state boys who were tested on, and that was the first thing that he said. I never got my apology from the state. So I think there's space in there to move and think. So sorry, I know we're over time, but thank you so much.
Yeah, you're welcome. Yeah, wow. Okay.
Hi, this is Mary. I wanted to add one thing. If I don't know if people all need to jump off. No, I won't expand on it, but I really think all of this information is just so expansive. It's huge. And Jennifer, thank you very much for the history lesson, which I think was really helpful. And thinking back to our very first meeting, we discussed how there's so many types of institutions that have been in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, and that we need to keep our focus because we just cannot do it all within this one commission, even over several years, and should focus more on the institutions. I like that idea, going from the now and then going back, but focus on the ones that were specifically for people with mental health issues and folks with intellectual developmental disabilities. Even though we know that there were people that incarcerated, that a large percentage have disabilities, and there was a lot of mix in all of these institutions going back, I think that should be the focus for now, which is huge enough. And then starting from the institutions that were more recently closed during this century, going back from now back to 2000, and then going back from there to the 90s and so forth, and just sticking with the ones that were more of recent years, 50 years or so, more for IDD and mental health and people with mental health issues.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Mary.
Thank you, everyone. I think to our final minutes, we want to remind everyone that we have scheduled a next full commission meeting for Thursday, September 12th at 2:30. Does that work for everyone?
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah.
If members have any questions before then, you should feel free to contact us. If there's no other items to discuss, we can vote to adjourn. Please unmute yourself for the roll call vote. Do we have a
Jan?
motion to
Stay in.
adjourn?
I make a
Mary,
motion to adjourn.
Second.
Alex, stay in touch with me. And Mary.
Yes.
Thank you. I have a question. Don't we have to vote for something, or we already did?
Evelyn, we need to vote, but I can, as you requested, I can read the names.
Okay.
This is Jennifer. Okay. Elise? Kate?
Yes.
Sister Linda?
Yes, and I thank all of folks who put this agenda together and the reports that you gave. I learned so much. Thank you.
Thank you, Sister Linda. Reggie?
Yes.
Anne? Alex? Bill?
Yes, and I have to jump to another meeting. Thanks, everybody. It was informative exponentially.
Thank you. Rania?
Yes, and I have to jump off too.
Thank you. Andrew?
Yes, and same. I will see you guys in a few months.
Yes.
Yeah.
Mary?
Yes.
Vesper? Brenda? Connor?
Yes, and I have to go. The building is closing.
Matt, he's absent, and Evelyn.
Yes.
I think you can adjourn the
nice
meeting.
evening.
Thank you, everyone.
Stay in touch.
Meeting
Stay in touch,
adjourned.
Kate.